Yep. We are live on LinkedIn now. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Optimizing Live event. I'm Richard Dahlman. I'm going to be the host and moderator today. Today, I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues, Randy Hale and Brad Swanson, and our very special guest, Laura Powers. So thank you all for joining today. I'm really excited. Love that. I'm excited to have a really lively conversation today. For those of you that are in our live audience on LinkedIn, please feel free to add comments, questions along the way, share your reactions. We will hold Q&A till the end of the session, but I'll be keeping an eye on the thread, and we'll do our best to make sure that all your questions get some response toward the end. So we're hoping to have a really lively conversation today. I'm really looking forward to it. So Randy, Brad, Laura, take it away.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. We're here to riff a little bit on our perspective talks coming up for the Agile 2025 conference in Denver next week. Hope to see many of you there. Laura and I are presenting a talk titled Beyond Bureaucracy, Unlocking People-Centered Agility. Laura, what strikes you as one of the key elements of the conversation we're about to have that people should care about?
Well, I think that life is far too short for us to put up with bureaucracy that holds our organizations back from doing what they do and what they need to do to create the impacts that we want to see in the world. So
love it.
At the Business Agility Institute, we do a lot of work with organizations in terms of how do you move towards human-centric, people-centered ways of working. And it's all rainbows and unicorns and fluffy clouds until we get into talking about how do you sustain the changes, the behavioral changes that you're looking to create. And the really bad news is if you don't look at your policies and procedures, your systems, your governance, what you're doing will become something that's easy to backtrack to the old status quo when the going gets rough. And let's face it, these days, the going is rough and getting rougher from time to time. So now is the time to start looking at how do you help your organization move to having just the right governance and not too much to the point that it's hindering your ability to serve your customer. So it's too bad that I don't care about this topic. And I hope I can find some for next week. But in all seriousness, it's super important. And what I love about working with Randy and putting this together is just because it's super important and because a lot of people think that it's the boring bits of business, we are looking at how to make it memorable, attention-getting, and compelling. So Tuesday afternoon, you need to be at our session to find out what we're cooking.
Yeah. And Brad, I'm going to build on what Laura says, and then I'm going to tee it up for you because I think it'll be a really natural segue into your talk. But from what you just said, Laura, the thing that really strikes me is how frequently I see people working in a system that doesn't necessarily serve them, serve their function, serve the impact that they're trying to create for their clients, whether they be external consumers or other businesses or even just internal colleagues. And how do we unlock that? How do we give the people the power to say the system isn't serving us and we want to have a conversation around that? I've worked in so many different organizations where the constraints are treated as just hard and fast and like you can't question it, and that's just the way it is. And so what our talk is hoping to bring is a new way to just drive those conversations and help create a bit of an unlock there, because if you can start to influence the system and make it better, and this goes for everybody in an organization. We want to be able to create that ability for them to influence the system.
Very cool.
Fantastic. Yeah, hugely important topic. I think mine will be a good follow-up to that. So my talk at Agile 2025 is Influence Without Authority. Subtitle I like is Jedi Mind Tricks and Research-Based Techniques. So I'll share some research, sometimes surprising research on how you can have more influence. What Laura and Randy are really talking about is how can you, as a leader, sometimes you don't have all the authority you wish you had. You don't have that magic wand you can wave just to make things the way you want them to be. You have to influence others. And that's what I'm talking about. So I think it's great to hear from Randy and Laura here about the importance of that human-centered leadership. And I'll talk more about the influence piece, I think, after you share a little bit more.
Oh, cool. Well, the thing that I love about what you're talking about, Brad, is that we have, all of us, a lot of beliefs that are buried in our unconscious, our subconscious, that we're not aware of. And it's when those things bubble up to the point that we're aware of it, we can realize sometimes that we have far more power and an influence than we might initially believe. And one of the things that really strikes me is the number of people in organizations right now who don't realize the amount of baggage that they're carrying around with them that is self-limitations. So it's bad enough that it's hard to find openings to influence the people in your organization and the systems in your organization, but you don't know how much censoring, and self-inflicted limitations we place on ourselves. There's a story that's told about this woman who was an HR manager at Hewlett Packard, long career, levels of leadership way up into the organization in HR. She eventually decides to retire. She's sitting out on her patio, enjoying a beautiful California afternoon with the drink of her choice, and her cell phone rings. She looks at the caller ID and goes, oh crap, it's one of those. It's a recruiter. And for whatever reason, it could have been maybe her second gin and tonic. We'll never know. She decides to answer the phone. And it's a recruiter who says, I've got an opportunity for you that you can't say no to. And this person says, well, you want me to test me on that? But anyways, the recruiter pitches the opportunity to be the head of HR for this new thing that Amazon was starting called Cloud, AWS. Who knew? Anyway, so she joins as the head of HR for this organization. And it's in massive growth mode. They're recruiting like crazy. And they know that, and Amazon knows that one of the places they're out of compliance is there's a requirement. If you have a government employee applying for a job in a private sector position, there's some things that you have to do in order to make sure that it's cool for that person to apply for the job. And her solution for this was to create a way for this to be self-reported. So when you apply for the job, you provide the information and tick the boxes so that it puts Amazon into compliance. So they create this whole system. They've got this new part of the website to apply for a job. And she thinks it's ready to go live. And the only problem is she has no idea at Amazon, how do you go live with something like that? So she fumbles around and looks and eventually calls her mentor at Amazon. And the mentor was like, well, what's your problem? She's like, well, who authorizes this? And she said, well, the mentor says, well, you do. Have you tested this? Yes. Does it work? Yes. Are there major issues that you still need to fix? No. Do you have a rollback? If something goes south, do you know what you would do? Yes. And he said, well, then push the damn button. And the issue was that this person had carried baggage from decades at Hewlett Packard into this rapidly growing quasi startup in this brand new, internet born company, and was limiting herself. And I think that that's a really important point, is when we talk about governance and we talk about compliance and all of the things that we have to do, my question to you is, how much of what you believe you have to do is self-imposed limitations because unconsciously you're carrying stuff from way back when that is impacting what you do now? And if you're censoring your behaviors, which Randy and I care about, I would guess that you are also doing self-inflicted influence damage, which is what Brad cares about. Because if you don't say it because you don't think you can, how sure are you that you can't? There's better ways to say things. Because if I tell you, okay, we're not going to get into the stories where I tell somebody that, their dog is ugly, and anyways, but you get the point. There's ways to say things. There's ways to move things forward, but we've got to get rid of some of the baggage. And I've been hogging the stage here, so I'm going to pass the baton to somebody who blinks twice, Randy or Brad, to pick up what would you like to talk about?
I'll do a quick +1. So that one of the favorite leaders I've ever worked with in my career as a client had a phrase that he called it artificial walls of reality, where people walk around and you're asking them, hey, let's do this new thing. Let's try something a new way. And they're very quick to say, well, we can't do that. And he would ask, well, why not? And they would articulate, some reason, right? Some constraint that was just it was one of those tacit things that just by being in the system for a while, you came to understand that this was a constraint. This was a limitation. And he said, it's like, you think there's a wall there, but I bet if you go and you push on the wall, your hand will just go right through, because it's an imaginary wall. Like you've made up this constraint, and you're acquiescing to this thing that's not even real.
Reminds me of one of my favorite quotes or mindset, really. Ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And have the attitude of, well, let's try it and see what happens, rather than wait to get that permission. You may not ever get the permission, but if you just go do something, sometimes you're surprised at what you can make happen.
Yeah. So Brad, I'm curious, because our talk is centered on what are some ways we can uncover these things. We can start to really visualize, wow, like that's not really a constraint, or maybe it actually is a constraint, but we're questioning if that's really the thing that we want to be, favoring in our environment, because we have a trade-off in place. Like we're over optimizing for one thing, and it's costing us something else that's really good as well. So can we bring those things into balance? And knowing that kind of a conversation, a lot of times it's going to butt up against elements of an organizational operating model. I've been in a lot of environments where literally you're having a conversation with somebody that you think is at a high enough level to be able to have an operating model conversation. And they literally are like, oh, well, that's getting into something that I don't really know. And it's like, who the heck even knows who has the keys to the operating model in some environments? So back to your talk, Brad, if an organization doesn't have a way to voice those things, to engage in a conversation that says, we think we have an opportunity to improve our organizational system by making some minor tweak to the operating model, or at least running an experiment. If that thing doesn't exist, what are some of the things that you're going to cover in your talk that would help folks to, maybe influence the system?
Sure. Yeah. So maybe I get started by illustrating what a lot of us might do just sort of by default intuitively when you've got some challenge, you've got some friction, you're bumping into one of those constraints as you talked about, and now you've got your idea for how to fix the issue. And again, my talk is about influence without authority. So again, if you have the authority, if you were the CEO, you could just say, I declare, or I dictate, we'll make it so. But oftentimes we don't have that authority. By the way, even if you do have the authority, sometimes it's best to not play the boss card. But so we'll assume here that you're not going to play the boss card, even if you were the boss. So you've got this problem. Now you want to try to do something about it. So our approach often is we run and we say, hey, everyone, I've got a great idea. Here's my idea. Here's all the reasons why it's the best idea ever. And I'm confident it's going to fix all of our problems. Now, who's on board with me? That's often the kind of approach. So there's several problems with that wrapped into that approach we often take. So first, you started off by just jumping right into my idea, my solution, my thing that I want to do. What the research shows is instead, you got to take a step back and help people understand what is the problem you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that the problem is clear to people first. Because if they don't care about the problem, or if they don't see the problem, they sure as hell aren't going to care about your solution. Mm-hmm. Second mistake we often make there is we throw out 5, 6, 8, all these amazing reasons why this is the best idea ever. The research actually says you're going to be better off if you stick with just 1 or 2 reasons why your idea is a good one. And the interesting reason behind that is the more reasons that you list the more arguments you try to make to support your idea, the more likely it is somebody's going to hear one of those and say, that kind of sounds like BS to me. And now you don't appear credible. So they're going to dismiss and discard anything you say at that point for that one thing that you said. Even if you had 8 other, really good things to say, that one thing is going to turn people off. The third thing here is at the end of this, we want to show people you have to have this delicate balance here. Yes, you want to be confident enough in your idea that people will support it. But secondly, they want to see some humility. They want you to say, what do I not know yet? Why would I need you to help me with this? Because if you just show up as, I've got all the answers, I'm the superhero here, then people are like, okay, well, you've got it. You don't need me. So go do your thing if you're so sure of yourself. So that's what some of the research behind influence shows. So again, one of those keys, make sure people understand the problem before you start giving them a solution. Come up with 1 or 2 good reasons why people might want to support your idea, not 5 or 6 or 8. And then make sure you're a little bit humble enough to show that you actually need some help.
So my spidey sense tells me that empathy is really important here. How do you see empathy playing into what you're talking about, Brad?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a foundation behind all of this that's going to really streamline and enable you to have more influence, and that is trust. Which I think is closely associated with the empathy here. So, and I love how this ties in with your topic, that idea of human-centered leadership. We've got to remember that we need to invest in these relationships over time to build trust with people. If you just treat each thing that happens as a transaction, I need to go make sure Laura does this thing for me, or I got to convince Randy to get on board with this strategy. You're forgetting that, wait, these are humans. I want to have more influence over them, I need to build up that trust and have some empathy for their viewpoint. I want to invite them to contribute to coming up with a better idea, better solution, not just be the cheerleader for my own idea, but be saying, hey, I've got an idea, but how could you make it better? What could you contribute that's gonna make this thing be even better for both of us so that we both can win?
Yeah, that's the key, right? And that's one of the things that in the workshop that Laura and I are running, one of the activities is designed explicitly to try and help bring that dynamic about, to try and diffuse the whole, engineering versus product, or the PMO versus engineering, right? Like, what are these, potential function to function battles that sometimes emerge? And, often you'll see, a stance taken of like, well, here's why I need it this way, and here's why I can't do it the way that's better for you. And instead, how do we put the problem on the table and have both parties, or, maybe it's more than two parties or two functions. How do we have everybody sit on the same side of the table together and look at the problem together, right? It's like the problem is the system is the problem. It's not me versus you or us versus them. It's the system might not be serving us collectively as well as it could.
Yeah, and that's another thing that the research shows about influence that you're getting to, which is, and this comes from research that studied negotiators. Now, here we're talking about professional negotiators, like people who are negotiating, hostage situations or labor contracts or, big business deals. What the research shows is the best negotiators, they spend a lot more of their time and effort trying to find that common ground with the other side. Whereas your mediocre negotiators, they just don't put much effort behind that. They'll spend more of their effort kind of attacking the other side and, trying to really raise up their own position. But again, the best negotiators are all about, hey, what do we have in common here? What's a win-win? They're really looking for something that we can both agree on that needs to happen. That then gives you the foundation to build on, where you can find a solution together and move forward.
Yeah, that reminds me of, there's two fundamental approaches to negotiation. One is the belief that for me to win, you have to lose, and then the alternative is what you were just describing of how can we both win, and how can we start to build the case of all the things that we agree on and continually build that up to the point where we're just at the edge of Laura thinks this and Brad thinks that, and we start to diverge, and we work there, rather than a lot of times negotiators start at the very highest level. And that is a point where you're in Colorado and I'm in California, and it's going to be a big piece of work for us to come together. But if we, work up to that, it's a totally different scenario. And oftentimes what I really, really want is something that doesn't matter to you, and vice versa. But if you got to get to the point that you can have that conversation. And from an organizational perspective, we like to talk a lot about getting rid of silos. And I'm guessing that Brad's research would tell you, human nature is for us to group into clumps of people, and you can't get rid of silos. Silos are a fact of modern business. BAI is tiny, tiny, tiny. And we oftentimes have a silo in Melbourne, Australia, a silo in California, and one in Germany. I mean, who would have guessed? The different way of thinking about it, though, is how do you make your silos transparent and porous? because we're still going to group together and you're going to group together. But how can we make it such that information, ideas, and decisions can flow back and forth? And one of the keys is what Brad's talking about is how do you develop those communication skills and those influence skills and the willingness to step out of your group and be the vulnerable one to go visit that other group. I was going to say go have lunch with them, but with so many folks working remotely now, I think that is really hindering the mission of both of our talks at Agile 2025. It makes bureaucracy that much harder, and it certainly, I would guess, impacts influence. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, again, the foundation of having more influence oftentimes is building that trust. And getting back to the leadership piece here, I think as a good leader in these times when people are so often working remotely, we've got to put more effort into figuring out how do I build these human connections? How do I build up relationships? Not just me, so I can influence others, but those on my team. I want them to be better connected, to have that empathy for each other. And it's probably not going to happen if all we do is video calls and we jump right into business every time and it's back to back calls. You've got to put that extra effort in because people can't have lunch together. They're not, going to have a coffee break together during the day and passing each other in the hallway. So I think we have to, as leaders, think about how do I create those opportunities deliberately and create the space for that to happen when we don't have that shared physical space together. So I agree. It makes it harder to establish that trust, that empathy, those human relationships. I think, again, this goes back to your topic, and I'd love to hear if maybe this is part of what you're talking about with this idea of human-centered leadership. I've heard you talk about like, how do we challenge some of the constraints, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about sort of how does a leader kind of keep that humanness or that humanity top of mind in terms of leading an organization?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind for me is part of our activity is centered around starting with how does the current system feel? Often we start the conversation in a bits and bytes, ones and zeros, like let's get into process analytics mode, right? Let's map the value stream. My perspective on that is you get people in a very different mentality and headspace around this is a math problem to be solved. And, the hypothesis is, what if we just started off by saying, this part of the process for me feels really bad. It feels like nobody cares about the impact on my function, my team, me individually. Here's what it feels like. And then let's distill that down into what's actually happening, because every system, I always forget who this quote is by, but every system is perfectly designed to deliver the results it's delivering, right? There's a famous quote by somebody who I'm forgetting. And so
Deming, we love Deming.
There you go. Yeah. W. Edwards Deming. What we want to do is just start there before we get into too much into mechanics mode, because often what I see is when we get too much into mechanics mode, those people-centered conversations are way harder to have.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to bring your chicken to work.
Yeah.
So right as the pandemic was hitting and things were closing down, one of the last coaching gigs that I had at the time was with an organization in Southern California. And the big boss for the group was this woman who, in the back of my mind, she was someone who's like theme song would have gone da, 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 the whole, witch music from Wizard of Oz. I mean, she intimidated her people. They were afraid of her. She walked right up to bullying them. It was like, whoa, this is going to be interesting. And then things shut down, and now all of a sudden we're stuffed onto Zoom and trying to continue this very nascent transformation. And there was a meeting that I'll never forget that was the point that everything changed. And this woman was taking a call with her team in her kitchen, and she shows up with a chicken on her lap. Now, I didn't realize that in like LA County, at least, you can have chickens in your backyard. And she had a chicken that was ill and not feeling well, and she wanted to basically keep it close to keep an eye on it and to see if it was time to head to the vet. And so this very proper, Prada-powered, dressed to the nines, scary boss bully shows up in her sweatpants with a sick chicken on her lap, and you could literally feel her team melting with concern for her and concern for the animal. And it was a different conversation. And the conversations after that were all different too. So sometimes as the leader, you've got to be willing to be vulnerable, even if it means bringing your sick chicken to work or to the meeting and sharing that part of you, because the connection that you'll create and the influence that you can have is so much bigger when you show up authentically and let those little cracks in your world be a tiny bit more visible to the people that you work with.
Yeah, I love how that for me, that connects back to Brad's talk in through the context of asking for help, right? Like framing it as like, I have this problem. Can you help me? I feel like the whole influence without authority, if you've got the right kind of environment with the right kind of people, I think more often than not, you have the kind of people in the majority of organizations that will respond positively to that versus showing up saying, here's what I think you should do.
Yes. And part of what I love about the canvas that you're going to be sharing in our session, Randy, and I want to make sure that this is the awesomeness that's Randy Hale. So anyways, part of this is, I think that it's really rare for somebody to say, let's talk about bureaucracy and governance and empathy. And the first canvas that you have developed really is about building that awareness so that the conversation can start and that we can talk about, what is it that we want to co-create? Because then that makes influence a two-way street, and it's really effective. So, Mr. Swanson, what do you think?
Well, I was just going to say, for people who are considering going to the Agile 2025 conference, good reason to go to your talk there. I love that you have something tangible to give people. That canvas is something powerful. It's not just these sort of nice, fluffy ideas that are all useful, but it is tangible. So that's the benefit of being there at the talk for folks who can make it to Denver.
You want to be in the room where it happens.
That's
yeah,
right.
for sure.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And I think one of my hopes for our session is that people feel some level of empowerment to help change how governance is approached in their organization and help reduce bureaucracy. There's a book called The Friction Project by Bob Sutton and Huggy Rao, who are Stanford Business School professors. And they talk about one of them, I want to say it was Bob, needed to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to transfer the registration for a car from his mother-in-law to himself. And he put it off and he put it off and he put it off because everybody knows that like the last great bastion of bloated bureaucracy has to be the DMV. So he just did not want to go there. He finally decided, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to go, and I'm going to go first thing in the morning and just like, deal with it and get it over with, because we know how bad it's going to be. So he shows up and there's already a line and the place hasn't even opened yet. And he's like, oh crap, this is just going to be awful. And he said it wasn't too long, but this guy comes out from inside, still not open, but he sets up this folding table and starts piling up papers. And, his reaction was, what fresh hell has the DMV designed now, And so then the guy picks up a clipboard and goes to talk to the first person in line. And he sees some things happening, gives him some papers, blah, blah, blah. Goes to the second person and talks to him. And that person leaves. And Bob's like, oh, crap, this is really like they're starting before they start. And so the guy finally gets to him. And he understands what it is that Bob was looking to do. And he said, okay, so here's the scoop. What you need to do, you need to go to line number 9, and here's the paperwork that you need to fill out, and you're going to need to be able to pay in this way. Gives him the whole scoop, all the paperwork. And the people that left, they were told that the most expedient way to solve their problem was to go home and do it online. And so even in the DMV, where nothing inside changed, they conceived in the Redwood City office how to change how bureaucracy works so that people could navigate the system in a more effective way. And that's my hope for our session, is there's going to be people who have these, oh, heck yes moments to say, I see a way to start to streamline and improve how we operate so that the bureaucracy serves our business, doesn't hinder our business. So anyways, that's my hope. Plus, a couple of good stories and a giggle or two with Randy.
Yeah. I love that, because I think that is a big call to action from our talk is own the system that you're in, right? Take ownership, lean in. Don't just assume, that everything that you see as a constraint is not
really,
or that you can't have a conversation, right? In your DMV example, how many people where like it's just a mindset, you show up to work and you say, these are all the rules, and I sit at my desk and I do this job, and when people show up at my desk to engage with me, if they're not following a rule, I tell them. And it's like, after you waited 45 minutes, it's like, I could have made this, brought this to my attention 45 minutes ago.
Oh, cool. So Mr. Brad,
yeah,
what's your hope? What's your dream for your session? How's the world a different place when you're done with your 75 minutes of awesomeness at Agile 2025?
Yeah. So what I hope is that everyone in that room is going to walk away. Oh, look, I got fireworks again.
With fireworks.
I hope everyone's going to see the fireworks now. What I'm confident is people are going to walk away with 3 or 4 things that they know. I know what I can do now to be more influential. For those people who are managers and bosses, I think they're going to see, hey, here's some things I can do that can get people more engaged, where I don't just have to play the boss card every time and get people to do things because I said so. For others who don't have as much authority in their position, I expect this is going to give them tools they can now use to have more influence, to get more stuff done, to get others to, engage with their ideas, to get less pushback. So again, these are things that they're pretty simple to do. The challenge is, again, they're sometimes counterintuitive. Yeah. As I demonstrated earlier, we kind of have this intuitive sense of go in, tell people your idea, give them all the reasons, got to be confident, 100% confident about you got the right answer in order to persuade people. Those are those myths that I hope to bust and show people that the science around this shows that there's actually different approaches that are more effective, and just requires you to be aware of them and start practicing them. Again, it's not super complex. Once you know a few of these tips, they're things you can put into practice right away.
And nobody's going to go, oh my God, what are you doing? Because it's actually natural stuff that we do when we're with our friends, and now it's just in a different situation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very cool.
You talked about empathy, and I talked about trust. One of the important psychological things to remember is that humans, for the most part, make up their mind and they make decisions emotionally and intuitively, not analytically. And that's one of the keys to unlocking influence, is helping to remember, if I want to persuade somebody about something, I've got to find the emotional connection. What's going to help them really see the problem? What's an emotional way they can connect to it? Because if I just go in like the accountant and say, here's the list of all the factual reasons why my idea is so great, you're not going to connect with people. They're going to have that initial emotional reaction to something, and then later they're going to justify it in their own mind. So make that emotional connection to convince people. Then they can go back and say, oh, well, yeah, he did give me a couple good reasons. They can analytically justify their decision at that point, but they're not going to make the decision analytically.
And the scary thing is that holds true for what are you going to have for lunch, and it holds true for the multi-million-dollar investment in the new manufacturing equipment, that you would think that there is no emotion for that, but there absolutely is. So that is a good reminder.
Yeah, it reminds me of a great story from the Heath brothers in the book Switch. They talked about this company that had multiple factories, and they had gloves that workers had to use, and they were sourcing gloves from like dozens of different sources, and so this leader realized, hey, we have an opportunity to save a bunch of money here if we just consolidate and get a bulk buying deal on these gloves. He took all these numbers to all these leaders, and they're all like, yeah, whatever, would save a little bit of money, but it didn't connect with people enough to where they wanted to make the change. So then what he did is he called all these folks together, and he had like a batch of all the different gloves delivered and piled them up on top of the meeting room table. Everyone walks in and they see a big pile of gloves. And he said, this is our problem. You can see how many different gloves that we're all ordering. That was what finally got people to make that switch. It was when they could see it for themselves and have that kind of emotional, visceral gut reaction to like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Yeah. We have to change. It wasn't seeing numbers on a spreadsheet that said we could save 20% on our glove purchasing.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, I want to have so much influence that I get spontaneous fireworks. I'm just saying I have fireworks envy right now, Brad. So just going to put that down. I don't know. Be
careful what gestures I make with my hands here.
Oh, well, that is a good rule of thumb for influence, is you must always be careful of what gestures you make online and who's receiving them. Fireworks, good. Other things, not so good. Oh, very cool.
So a prompt for the two of you here, just sort of out of the blue, but what are you most looking forward to other than doing our perspective talks at the Agile 2025 conference next week?
Ooh, Brad, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
No, go for it, Laura.
So what am I looking forward to? I want to see people, and I want to shake their hands, give them hugs if they're the hugging type, and not be behind a screen looking at an avatar or something like that. I want to be able to be in the room that Randy's in and hear what he's got to say, and Brad and Jenny and George and everybody else, because I think that it's harder and harder for us to spend the time face to face in places now. And honestly, that's where the real authenticity is, because everything else is feeling more and more manufactured, more and more artificial, if you will. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing how it has evolved. Last year, I was at Agile 2024, but was facilitating an executive forum, so wasn't really able to like get out and talk to other folks to the extent that I will be this year. So I'm kind of interested to see like what are people's take on this, because God only knows, the world still needs what we're doing. It needs human-centric, people-powered ways of working. We have a lot of work to do, and there is a lot of crazy change and limitations being put on what we're doing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people are up to and finding some inspiration and sharing some. So how about you, Mr. Brad? What are you looking for?
Yeah, very similar. To me, it's really going to be about those face-to-face human connections. I just get tired of always being on video. So I'm really looking forward to being in the same physical space as a lot of other amazing humans. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, plus one for me on that. And one of the things I'm curious about is the blend of attendees and what influence the PMI the merger with PMI has on, are we gonna have some new faces, maybe folks that are coming more from, more involved in PMI specific over Agile Alliance. Of course, there's a lot of folks that kind of participate equally in both, but I'm hopeful that the participation mix is, that there's a healthy influx of folks who maybe have been historically more focused on just their PMI relationships. I think there's a lot of really interesting conversations to be had there. And Laura, especially for our session, right, where we're, it's a call to action to how can we all improve our system. And I think, program managers, project managers, PMO leaders are all right at the epicenter. They've got ultimate visibility into what's going on and what can be better. So looking forward to that.
I think you got it. And I'm excited. I shipped a box of ducks to Randy, or a box of Legos to Randy a couple of days ago, because we're going to open our session with an exercise that uses Lego. And I haven't used Lego since before the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to inflicting that on a group of people, seeing how they respond to it. And I'm just really very grateful for the opportunity to like do something live and in person and not over Zoom, Teams, SteamYard, or oh my God, WebEx. There's all kinds of technology that can just bury you.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And
gotta love a session with Lego.
Gotta love a session with Lego, especially one where you get to take it home with you, because Lorabelle's not taking it back to California. Oh, cool.
That's like, what a great takeaway. Looks like we've hit the time for our maybe wrap up Q&A session here.
Yeah, so great conversation. I love all the stories. Definitely a lot of imagery and experiences were kind of bouncing around my head as I was hearing you all talk. Had a couple of good comments from Sean in the audience. I have a question to the group. So, the core of the conversation around human-centric leadership, influence without authority. A lot of great examples there. What do we think, obviously with the AI movement, things are going to be changing at a much more rapid pace than ever before. I'm curious, on a general human level, how do we see, the advent of AI, the advent of things being at our fingertips? How do we see that changing people's behavior, and how, that human-centric leadership, or, influencing without authority, how is that going to hold up as technology just becomes more and more robust and immediate?
Yeah, I mean, my take is it becomes even more important. It doesn't become less important. Finding, sort of designing the balance. What is the balance we want in our system? And I think as part of your tee up there, Richard, is we're certainly seeing this. I don't know. It's like the gold rush, right? Let's rush towards like whatever AI thing we think can save us a nickel or a dime or a dollar. And I think we're already seeing some backlash against that. One of the patterns that's confusing, it's confusing, but it's not surprising, I guess, is almost every organization I've ever worked with has a prioritization problem and a capacity problem, right? They can't make the tough calls. We really want to do 100 things, but we've only got capacity for 50. So what happens when they find a way to apply AI? Instead of saying, cool, we can do 80 of the 100 things, or maybe we can do 100 of the 100 things now. It's no, we're going to reduce our capacity from 50 to 30, and we're still not going to be able to do all the things we want to do. So how do we get the humanness in the loop, and create balance there? I think that's the big question that everybody's grappling with.
Yeah, I look at the organizational implications of AI, and I think the mistake a lot of organizations are making right now is they're just rushing to get tools out there. I talked to a guy just last week who was in charge of rolling out Copilot 365 in his whole organization, and he told me, he's like, I want to know you. I need your help because I can roll out the tool, but the problem is everybody's asking, well, how do I use the tool? What can I use it for? What can't I use it for?
Mm-hmm.
What really matters? Like, just getting the tool out there is not the problem, but leaders, and to go to your point, if human-centric leaders need to remember, hey, wait, we still have humans here. How do I consider the impact of this on all the talented humans that work in the organization? And how do I optimize my organization to use these tools? How do I even find out what's the right thing to use the tools for? So I think we're going to be facing this era where it's just everybody's throwing tools out there, and nobody makes sense of how do we coherently use these tools to actually get a meaningful result.
Yeah, and that reminds me, Laura, we were talking last week, and you reminded me of this quote that I was struggling to place, but I think this is another Deming quote, if I'm not mistaken. But there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. And I'm already seeing a ton of that with AI, right? We have this Band-Aid process that's fixing a broken system. There's 2 or 3, 4 root causes that ideally we would see and address, but no, let's build a custom GPT to make the Band-Aid process faster.
Yep. So it's one of the privileges of aging and having perspective that goes back a while. I remember my first desk out of graduate school didn't have a personal computer on it. It had a really crappy terminal on it. Anyways, fast forward a little bit. Now we're in the age of the internet, and the late 1990s, there was this gold rush feeling as well. I live in Silicon Valley, and there are, everybody and his brother was pitching the VCs and getting money for some of the more and more crazy things to make use of the internet. And I knew that we had hit like a really dangerous point in time when someone had venture capital funding for a product that would be an accessory for your personal computer that would provide smell-o-vision. So if you were seeing an ad for Toll House chocolate chip cookies, you'd smell cookies. And you can go like in the opposite direction and just imagine how that could really be used for badness. And of course that fell apart, and pets.com fell apart. And all of these folks who thought that they needed to have first mover position and jockeyed around for all kinds of like, I'm going to be rich and buy my own tropical island, things fell apart. And then after the bubble burst, for the next couple of decades, we built what we've got now in terms of the internet and all of the things that enables. And we have multiple generations now who can't conceive of what it must have been like when we actually made phone calls using rocks or whatever it was that we did before the internet. We're in that times probably 1,000 or 100,000 with AI. It's going to fundamentally change how we live our lives. And it's kind of like thinking about electricity. Power goes out, you ain't doing a whole lot. There's going to be a future where if AI goes out, whatever that means, you're not going to be able to do some really important things as well. And it's going to fundamentally change how we live, not just how we work.
Yeah.
McKinsey published a study that said that when in the day and age of digital transformations, which wasn't that long ago, if a company spent $1 on the technology for a digital transformation, they also spent $1 on leading the change and integrating that technology into how their organization conducted business. They said now in a AI transformation, $1 spent on the technology of AI, and let's face it, it's not $1, it's like crazy, crazy money. For every $1 spent, the budget should be $3 to lead the change. That's how do you integrate it? How do you have that work? And how do you blend that with the people and the organization? Because it's not lights out, send everybody home. The bots are taking care of it. It's going to be this hybrid situation. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to create a better world using AI. And I know that there's a lot of risk of how that could go sideways. And I think our job is to be there, boots on the ground, to help organizations navigate that and to do the best possible thing for the business, for their customers, and for their people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, earlier you all were talking about empathy, among other things, and trust. This, to me, there's so much uncertainty about what's coming for the average layman. And I think for me, that translates into having empathy and understanding that uncertainty and how it affects people. And, that's going to change the way we interact, and that's going to change the way we lead and how we influence others. Excellent conversation, everyone. I want to give everybody a quick minute to kind of make a final pitch or a final statement, put your stake in the ground, if you will, as we wrap up. So I'd like to start with Laura as our special guest, and then we'll have Brad and then Randy close it out for us. So Laura, what's the one thing you would like to leave with everyone today as we wrap up?
I think that I would leave you with the hope that we'll see you in Denver, Colorado next week for Agile 2025. And if not there, somewhere, because it's far too easy to lead lives of quiet desperation these days, isolated, just plowing through the pile of work that you've got, or plowing through the process to find what your next chapter in your career is going to look like. And all things are possible through the connections that we have with the people in our community and in the greater business world. And I think that it's worth it to make those connections. And I look forward to seeing people there. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll maybe just give a +1. I'm noticing a comment coming in there about the importance of humans, over the machines and the AI. I think that's going to be the challenge for leaders going forward. It's going to be something you need to emphasize more than ever is how do I keep my humans connected? Yes, we'll have AI agents doing a bunch of stuff for us, but at the end of the day, we're doing it in the service of humans, and you got to keep your humans connected. So leaders, go down on making sure that you're focusing on the humans, not the robots.
Yeah. My takeaway thought is I really hope for those, whether you come to either of our sessions or not, I still want you to take this away. Take ownership of the system that you're in. You don't have to just take all these constraints, especially if it's causing you pain, if it's causing you discomfort. That's what our talk is all about, is how do we unlock a better conversation so that we can, step back, look at the system and find ways to make it better. But, don't just take the status quo as this is just the way it is and I can't do anything about it.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all for a great, lively discussion today. So for everyone viewing this session, thank you for your being an audience for us today. Again, you can find Laura. She's with Business Agility Institute. You can find her on LinkedIn. Engage and ask her any questions you want. She's always a source of information. And Brad, Randy, and myself are part of Optimizing for Impact. We're a collective of individuals just trying to bring, a little bit of human-centered goodness to the world and try to help companies navigate change. So we look forward to hearing from you, and stay tuned for our next Optimizing live event. Keep an eye on our LinkedIn page, and we hope you join us for our next event. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Whoop, whoop. Thank you.